I'm Charlie Crocker with Genasys Zonehaven, and I'm here with Jeff Norris, Emergency Management Coordinator from the County of San Mateo.
And we were fortunate to be on the pilot end of Zonehaven when it was first being developed, as the zones were starting to be established and as they were starting to determine how evacuation zones would be coordinated and the type of information that would be necessary in them.
Yeah, so we were excited to work with you during the actual CZU Complex fire. That was the first fire that we were on, and you were in the trenches while that happened. So can you talk about kind of the first days of the CZU Complex fire and how you guys were thinking about it?
Absolutely. So we had the great advantage of Chief Jonathan Cox, who was out as the incident commander in the field, and he was calling us back at the EOC and giving us the information so we could do the alert and warning for him. Basically so that he didn't have to draft messages in the field and try to get them delivered. We were taking care of all of that. On the CZU fire started on a Sunday pre-dawn, with many lightning strikes across the entirety of San Mateo County, spanning Santa Cruz and into Santa Clara County. Monday morning, it was clear that there had been multiple small fires lit by that, but the fog combined with the smoke produced an environment where you could not tell where the fire was. As the fog started to lift on Tuesday morning, it became very apparent that the small community of Dearborn and Lomamar were both in danger of the fire running towards them with the prevailing winds. Jonathan called and said, I want you to put these two zones into warning and send out the alert to them. Well, as the weather changed, the fog receded, the smoke started to lift, it became very apparent that this was not a small fire, it was a very large fire. It was in the crown of the trees and it was spreading rapidly. Prevailing winds were moving the fire northward, and the evacuation warning rapidly turned into an evacuation order. Then it started expanding. As the winds were changing, becoming unpredictable, the fire started moving towards the town of Pescadero, and then started moving towards Skyline Boulevard, and then started moving north again, and more zones. I would basically receive a phone call from Jonathan saying, I just put 2, 3, 5 more zones into evacuation order. And I was rapidly using the predefined script that we had come out with, pasting the information in, making a hybrid message, putting it out over the wireless emergency alerts using our iPause portal, the SMC alert, our alert and warning tool, and any other tool that we had available to us, including our reverse calling system.
How many alerts did we do that first day or two?
The first 2 days, about 25.
So, yeah.
And as it was just growing.
Right. So I remember that first call from Jonathan, and we were only going to put a single zone under an evacuation warning. And within 8 hours, we had at least 5 or 6 zones, and many of them were under an evacuation order.
Yeah.
How would you have done this in a previous life prior to having the zones?
In a previous version, we would have been on the phone, back and forth, on the radio, describing the area. You know, it is west of this community, it is south of this community. And I've lived there all my life, I'm very familiar with the area, Jonathan's very familiar with the area, but if it had been people who weren't familiar with the area, it would have been this guesswork of what creek, what road, what street. It would have been very difficult.
How much time do you think you would have saved between the old way of describing and using the zone methodology?
Well, using a fire from just 5 years earlier that wasn't nearly as big, but it was in a canyon, and with a out-of-county chief covering because of rotation, it probably took him 10 minutes to describe just where he thought the fire was to a person who knew the community well. I'm dreading if it had been somebody who didn't know the area well.
Right.
It would have been near impossible for him to describe it. As opposed to, you know, I have just changed a zone. I can see it on the computer. Let me draw a polygon and get it sent.
Right. And then how did the community respond to the zones?
So the community actually embraced them pretty nicely because we were able to attach the map to the email. We were able to put a link that would go directly to community side of Zonehaven, centered on where the area that was affected. And this is for the CZU fire, we're talking about a community of people who've been living in this very rural area, some of them for many generations, who tend to say, oh yeah, we've had emergencies before, we'll just wait it out. But this was a different circumstance. It was spreading fast, it was dangerous, they could smell smoke early in the hours of Monday, and instead of just receiving one notification, they were getting a phone call, they were getting a text message, they were getting a WIA message, and they could link to a map. So that mulling effect, where people tend to wait, wasn't happening. So by Wednesday evening, maybe Thursday morning, I had 20% of my county under an evacuation order, 2% of my population displaced.
That's crazy. Well, thank you for your time. Really glad to have been able to work with you.
A pleasure to work with you, Charlie. Really appreciate the tool you've made.